Let me go ahead, and this is going to be recorded. Tiffany Marshall, go ahead and introduce yourself to Dr. Cleo Manago, please.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Marshall. I am
a little louder, I don't hear you.
Oh, goodness.
You better speak with that voice just loud. So you know I'm going to call you out.
All right, so my name is Tiffany Marshall, and I'm a senior, and I am currently in DC interning with Representative Yvette Clarke of New York.
Oh,
and yes, I'm working on technology policy with her and cannot wait for graduation.
I'm sure. Well, it's good to meet you, sister. My name is Dr. Cleo Manago, or you can call me Cleo if you like.
Okay, definitely. Thank you.
You too.
Mr. Matthew Williams. Can't hear. You still closed.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I just saw him for a few minutes too.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, take out the headphones. I think the headphones are kind of making it choppy.
And can you hear me now?
Much better.
Yeah. Yes.
Again, hi everybody. My name is Matthew Williams. I am a graduate student at Florida International University and at Nova. I am majoring at Nova in education, and at FIU I will begin my major in master's in public administration. Sorry.
We
Good
have.
to meet you. I'm Cleo.
Thank you. Nice to meet you as well. And nice to finally face to meet you, Travis.
It's a pleasure to meet you too, Matthew. And it was a pleasure to meet you, and it's great.
Yes, thanks.
And we have Miss Tiffany Peacock.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Peacock, and I'm currently serving as the treasurer for African and African Diaspora Studies Graduate Student Association. I'm also currently in the joint program with AADS and Global Sociocultural Studies, focusing on sociocultural anthropology. And I just want to say it's very nice to meet you, Dr. Cleo Manago, and I'm very excited to the talk and lecture that you're going to have with us today.
Well, thank you. And it's nice to meet you as well. And I share some of your major, anthropology and the cultural work you're doing. So excellent. Good to meet you.
Do we got any music requests?
You got Shaka Khan?
Oh, okay. Ain't nobody. Which one? Which one you want to hear?
Who knows? It doesn't matter. Anything but
Shaka
her.
Khan. Ain't nobody. Yeah. Love me some Shaka Khan too.
That was nice.
Love it. I got to get in the mood to hear some music every time. But that's because I mean that's what we do as Afro-descendant people. When we get the nervous out the way, we got to listen to some music to get it going.
Get it out.
But and keep in mind, I just want to go ahead and give everybody a small disclaimer. If we have any glitches that happen during this recording, or some things are unforeseen, please forgive us, because now we're living in a time where COVID has made things virtual. So I just want to go ahead and put that out there. And I will be followed by Mrs. Queen Mother Neanda Haram Rutledge.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all for being here. I would like to welcome you all to the African and African Diaspora Studies Graduate Student Association, along with the FIU Same Gender Loving Affinity Group. This is our second event of the 2020 fall semester. And I want to go over a few things that we're going to be covering this year from the AADS GA. I believe it's the next slide, and then I'll come back to mine. Yes. That the AADS GA goals for the fall semester is encouraging AADS department to rejoin the National Council for Black Studies, and STOLs for the AADS GSA members and scholars to receive upon successful e-board membership and graduation from AADS certificate or degree program. We're also going to have a Black Political Thought event in October, law school process in November, Carib Funk, a veterans event, FIU in DC, and professional development cover letters, resumes, and elevator pitches, all to be announced. I can do that without jitters, hopefully, Neanda Parms Rutledge. I am the CSO representative of the AADSGA. I'm originally from Miami, Florida. I identify as Queen Mother.
Queen Mother.
My ethnicity is African American. My race is Black. My pronouns are she and hers. My academic goals are to receive my master's degree in African and African Diaspora Studies. My hobbies are all things natural herbal medicines and remedies, natural hair and nails. I also enjoy weapons training and motorcycles. I own 2 Harleys myself. My professional goal is to operate my own nonprofit and to become a published author.
Excellent.
Yes. So the FIU now has the same gender loving group, same gender affinity. Am I saying it right? SGL Affinity Group.
Yes. It's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot to say. So do you want me to do this? Not this first paragraph. You want me to go and introduce our members now?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't believe she's with us yet, but Keishla Santiago, she's originally from Puerto Rico. You can take your time and go over a brief bio about her. We'll do about 5-10 seconds, right?
do, 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 do.
Okay. Next, our secretary, she goes as TK King, Tanae. You can read over her bio briefly.
She loves everything wine. That's why she's a great board member, because I love wine.
And more wine. She always says it.
And tacos.
Tacos.
And have a better e-board member.
You gotta love it. And we have Tiffany Peacock. I heard you speak before, but now the floor is yours, beautiful.
Okay. Hi, thank you, Nyanda. So again, my name is Tiffany Peacock, and I'm serving as the treasurer for this year. And I'm originally from Lexington, South Carolina. I identify, I guess, like I'm African American. My academic goal, as stated before, is I'm working on my PhD in the joint program for African Diaspora Studies and Global Sociocultural Studies with a specialization in sociocultural anthropology. Some of my hobbies include, listening to music, dancing, being outdoors, and exercising. And one of my professional goals is to, hopefully eventually publish my first professional article.
Can't wait to get a copy.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, I know. So we can go over our sequence of events here for the evening. I just want to say I'm excited, Dr. Cleo Manago. I'm really, really excited. I'm ready.
Well, thank you. I look forward to it myself.
Okay, now I have the honor and privilege to introduce the president of the AADSGA and founder of the FIU SGL Affinity Group and our moderator for the evening, Travis Dozier. He's originally from West Georgia, East Alabama.
Oh, country boy.
Yeah, real country boy. Identifies as same gender loving, SGL, cisgendered man. Ethnicity is African American, race Black. Pronouns are all, depending on the day. His academic goals are Master of Science in International and Intercultural Education, a graduate certificate in African and African Diaspora Studies. Hobbies are cooking, traveling, community service, and everything African and Black. Black, all Black everything.
Black everything. Everywhere I go in the world, I look for Blackness.
Become an entrepreneur. And I turn the floor over to you, Mr. President.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction, Queen Mother. You just made my transition a little easier. Well, everybody, before I introduce our distinguished guest, I want to give a little bit more about myself. In 2013, when I left Germany and moved to the Midwest to Missouri, it's been times where I was an active participant in the LGBTQ community, and I identified as gay at one time, but it never made sense to me. And throughout my leadership positions, throughout the LGBT organizations that I've been a part of, it was just as racist as the cisgendered, heterosexual, greater white, and Dr. Manago corrected me in the past, dominating, not dominant, but dominating society, if not worse. I got tired of the over-sexualization of my identity as a Black man. I got tired of dealing with all these struggles of inequality of, on top of being Black, being Black within the LGBT community, but put on different categories within that whole subculture. So in 2014, I stopped identifying as gay. I didn't want to have nothing to do with the LGBTQ community. but it was through looking at YouTube, I stumbled across this gem, who's our guest speaker, Dr. Cleo Manago, and my life was changed ever since. And for the last 7 years, I identify as same gender loving. And I see a sense of healing and a sense of identity and a sense of self-worth, something that I never had in the first 30 some years of my life. Our guest speaker, Dr. Cleo Manago, is a Black human rights activist, a social political analyst, a behavior health specialist, a writer, a filmmaker who coined the term same gender loving, for homosexual people of African descent. And he's done a lot. And in many, many years he's done. So I don't want to spend the whole time reading the whole bio, but I'm gonna name some things that are very noteworthy that he's done. He's the founder and the CEO of the Emasi Health and Cultural Center that was in Los Angeles. He was the founder of the Black Men's Exchange in Washington, D.C. He is a regular commentator on the nationally syndicated Black television newsworth, known as News One with Roland Martin. And for measures of controversial ideas that came from the larger gay community, a post was written about him in the Huffington Post called Cleo Manago, the most dangerous Black gay man, which, to me is an insult because the man is not gay. He's developed an awesome curriculum known as the Critical Thinking and Cultural Affirmation Preventative Health Intervention System that been adopted by the CDC and a lot of health organizations. With honor, gratitude, and humility, I introduce Dr. Cleo Manago.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. And thank you for the invitation. I'm honored. I really love engaging my people, particularly my young people who are ready to take my place one day relatively soon, and who are going to lead us into the empowerment and the affirmation, health, well-being, and defense of Black people, including same-gender loving Black people. So I'm always honored to do this work, and thank you for inviting me today.
Thank you for coming. It's an honor.
No problem. So whatever you want me to talk about, that's what I'll talk about. I'll let you moderate and guide me.
Oh, that's easy. Dr. Manago, I would like for you to talk about how was the LGBT community within the 70s and the 80s with Black people? Did Black people identify as gay within the 70s and the 80s around that time?
Okay, well, I'm glad you asked that. And I'm a history buff, so I got to add some history to create some contrast in my answer. Most of you have heard of James Baldwin, and you've heard of Bayard Rustin.
Yes.
They were contemporaries, meaning that they were both around the same time, and they're both same-gender loving or homosexual men. It's important to understand that James Baldwin, who had a higher profile because of his literary genius and his orator capacity, because of his profile, the white homosexual community tried to draft him into their circle because they figured it would help advance their capacity to be more seen and have more notability or notoriety. And Mr. Baldwin refused. This was in the very late 60s, leaning on the 70s. And Mr. Baldwin refused to join the gay movement because he was clear about it being racist and white and disrespectful of Black people, and basically having him feel the same way that you felt, Travis, in terms of his experiences. And he refused to join the gay community, as it was called, and identify as gay. And it's important to articulate that because people often refer to James Baldwin as gay, and he did not identify as gay.
Right.
He identified as homosexual, not as gay. And that was not a passive decision. That was an active decision because he didn't want to be affiliated with what he called accurately a white racist movement. Back in the day, the first name white gays came up with, or white homosexuals came up with, was the Gay Liberation Front, which was one of their first political groups. As a matter of fact, Huey Newton of the Black Panthers invited the leaders of the Gay Liberation Front. And before I finish that comment, I want everybody to know that since you have Google and likely have your phones near you, I invite you to look some of this stuff up in real time so you can find it and maybe ask any questions that come from what you find. But Huey Newton, who's one of the main founders of the Black Panthers, invited the Gay Liberation Front and poor whites, who he saw as oppressed in his country, to join the Black Panthers toward a freedom movement. The Gay Liberation Front and the poor whites wound up not really joining the coalition because of their racism. But when he refers to the Gay Liberation Front in his writings, in terms of his invitation, he was talking about white people. Black people did not identify widely as gay or lesbian until 1980. Before 1980, most Black people referred to themselves as one of the children, or being in the life, or are you family? We use very intimate family terms to identify and describe each other. And as a matter of fact, at that time, we were a lot more cohesive and caring of each other. Adapting gay and lesbian and stuff has kind of fractured us, and we don't have the kind of warmth that we once had. But going back to history so you won't be confused, people often hear about Stonewall. And they often hear that Stonewall supposedly was the beginning of the gay movement. Well, in fact, the people who were involved in Stonewall, which was a bar of homosexual people, including transgender people who were called drag queens and people who were androgynous. That's the word they used before they came up with transgender. It was primarily Black people. And Black people, regardless of where we were, like now, were being harassed by the police. Well, the police were often harassing the Stonewall Bar, which was made up primarily of Blacks and Puerto Ricans. One day, these Blacks and Puerto Ricans got tired of the police brutality, and they resisted and literally fought back and started a rebellion against police brutality and racism. Because it was the first recorded bar-based resistance, white gays used it as a frame of reference, but they were marginal to this event, number one. Number two, nobody involved in Stonewall called themselves gay. This was before the 70s, and white homosexuals had not used their hegemony and their white privilege and access to promote their movement until around 1970. And they used Stonewall as a frame of reference for themselves because it was so powerful, but they were not even there overall. It was a Black and Puerto Rican movement, and nobody there called themselves gays or lesbian. There was no LGBTQ and none of that at that time. As a matter of fact, the term lesbian wasn't being used in more universal use until around 75. And it wasn't become part of the normal nomenclature until almost the 1980s. Some of you may or may not know that the term gay is a derivative of the term gay Paris. You might have heard of Josephine Baker,
yes,
who was well known in France. And the majority of people who were in the entertainment community, the dancers, poets, etc., were homosexuals, predominantly white homosexuals. And they called that culture gay Paris. The term lesbian is named after an island near Greece, where the movement with Sappho was involved, and lesbian came from a derivative of the word lesbos, which is what that island is named after. As you can see, the genesis of lesbian and gay and even queer, which is from Britain, are not affirming or even inclusive of the Black experience or the African experience. And there's a very rich African history of same-gender loving affirmation that long precedes the very existence of Europe, let alone terms like lesbian and gay. But becoming more contemporary again, to make my point, James Baldwin did not identify as gay. However, Bayard Rustin, who, and I'm going to be really abbreviated here because some people get offended by this, but it's not my fault. Bayard Rustin was who he was. But it's important to understand that when James Baldwin was alive, because he was so much involved in pro-Black activity and so well respected by a lot of Black leaders, he was embraced. Now there were exceptions. There's exceptions to everything, but overall he was embraced. He was definitely embraced by Malcolm X. He was embraced by Huey Newton, and he's embraced by a lot of the leaders who were Black men and women of the time. But Bayard Rustin wasn't. And what white gays or Black people who are in love with white people will have you think is that Bayard Rustin was the victim of homophobia. Well, what's illogical about that is that James Baldwin, who was out homosexual, and Bayard Rustin, who was not out until way until his 70s. But during their heyday, Baird was not out. James Baldwin was. And Baird Rustin was not really involved with Black people. He was raised around Quakers. And he was very much into white people and white folks. As a matter of fact, he was often arrested for lewd conduct in parks with white men, naked in the park. And the reason that he was controversial was because of those arrests, not necessarily only because of his homosexuality. Again, James Baldwin, who had a lot of acceptance, was around at the exact same time. As a matter of fact, when James Baldwin finally died, he had literally a African king's memorial and funeral in Harlem, which was predominantly Black community, because he was Black. He was considered part of the Black culture. Baird was not. And matter of fact, it was Baird that helped to inspire the phrase that would come later, that gay was the new Black, which was a very ironic term because gay was racist, as it still is now. And how are you going to replace the Black history of resistance and say that the new resistance is gay when white gays have power, privilege, money, and access and power? And Black people don't even have the kind of power that white gays have. But anyway, to use and appropriate our history and our struggle, they started saying stuff like gay was the new Black. And it was Baird Rustin, who was very much linked to white gays, who helped to influence that one line.
Wow. Okay, this leads me to my next question, because you answered my 3 other questions. Wow. So I would say, I want you to touch on, Doctor, have you ever heard of the movie Flag Wars?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Can you touch on your thoughts about the Flag Wars and the whole context of what it means for our audience?
Okay. Well, the film Flag Wars, which I invite everybody Black to watch because it
did.
It brilliantly illuminates the difference between white gays, white folks who are homosexual called gay, and how they feel and treat Black people at that time and even to date. I think the film takes place in Ohio, if I'm not sure. I forgot its location. But it's a film about white homosexuals gentrifying and taking over historically Black community. And it's a story about how the Black people attempted to keep their community and how one of the leaders, who happened to be dying of cancer, and her passing helped to create even more room for these vicious and focused and ruthless white people to come in and do what they wanted to do. But they had no consideration or care about the Black community, the Black history, the historical Blackness of the community, and the community, the Black community is interest in being sustained. So what the film documents is how white gays took over a Black community. And they've done the same thing in Los Angeles. They've done the same thing in parts of Atlanta. They've done the same all over this country, taking over Black communities and not giving a damn about Black people's protests against them coming. So what this film inadvertently retells is how racist and conservative Black people the white gay community is, and helps illuminate reasons, for example, why James Baldwin would not join.
Right. And I've learned about Flag Wars when I was in St. Louis, that movie, because leaving Europe, because I was in Europe from 2004 to 2012, and living in the Midwest, we had to travel 2 hours to go have some type of, freedom as far as partying outside of rural Missouri. And I've noticed that the gay area is right in the smack of a Black neighborhood that's right behind it, adjacent to it. And what I had an awakening moment, doing my drunken stupor. I had an old sister. She said, "Baby, be who you are, but why you, fraternize at these clubs that done took over our community?"
Yeah.
And I got sober real quick. And she's like, "You need to go watch Flag Wars." And ever since I watched that really opened up a lot of awareness that I didn't know I possessed, but at the same time, it opened up some history that is often left out of the mainstream discourse. And,
go on.
This leads to a very important question. Did you ever identify as gay before you coined the term same gender loving? How did that come about? How did you find that awareness?
Well, similar to yourself in terms of the discomfort that you felt, I've always been very analytical, very observant, and very literal, which is why I've never been drunk or high in my entire life. I'm not judging it at all. I'm just explaining myself. Because of being very literal and very conclusive, and very intentional in terms of how I operate, I've been looking at things and testing things and evaluating things and studying things. When I first, and also it's important, and I'll be dating myself a lot, but ain't none of y'all business my age, so don't ask. Anyway, I was around, and this will help to date me, long before Black people identified as gay. So I was around when we were one of the children. When we asked you, are you in the life? Are you family? I was around during that time. And I remember, as I said earlier, how we treated each other, how we valued each other, how we defended each other, how we caressed each other because we knew we were going through a common struggle. And we also used those family terms, which kept us relatively connected compared to today. And when gay came along, similar to James, I saw it as something white and I saw it as alien. I literally studied it and went to their centers to see it for myself, and it was indeed extremely racist, extremely dismissive of Black people's humanity, and exploitive of whoever Black people were available to exploit in terms of exotic sexualization and things along those lines. So I knew I didn't want to have nothing to do with that. However, as I mentioned, in the late 70s, early 1980s, there were Black men in an organization called Black and White Men Together. I don't know if Black White Men Together have a website or they're still around. I knew they had changed their name to Men of All Colors Together, but it's really men who aren't white, who white people exploit and chase, is what the organization was, and who, in my opinion, in my research, look for Black men who are questioning their worth or questioning the value of Black people or who have no interest in Black people for them to exploit. The kind of people that Jeffrey Dahmer ate, in case people know who that is, and the kind of people who Ed Buck, who you may or may not know who that was able to attract. Black men with low self-esteem who had some question about the value of Blackness. Anyway, so I saw how the gay community was racist, exploitive, stereotyping of Black people, and how they were about themselves and each other. And I was not mad at them for being about themselves and each other. I was jealous. I was like, I wish Black people, same gender loving Black people, had the same level of focus, of group level defense, and entitlement. Because they were already white, homosexual or not, they felt entitled to whatever the world had to offer and whatever this country, including its government, had to offer, which is one of the ways they were able to succeed and learn to manage the HIV/AIDS crisis, which is a whole nother story that Black same-gender loving people have yet to manage because of the interruption of people who are either white and racist or Black and self-hating. And I can get very explicit with names and everything around those people if necessary, but the bottom line is gay was introduced to Black people by Black people who were part of the white gay culture or who tried to be. And there's the other issue that led some Black people to identify as gay was that the Black community was not prepared to explicitly discuss, acknowledge, or neutrally engage the issue of same-sex marriage, not marriage, scratch that, same-sex love and same-gender relationships. So between the gap in acknowledgement coming from the Black community, and in some instances, the religious oppression coming from some people in the Black community, and in some instances, having a father or male figure who was really hard on what a man should be, because a lot of castration and oppression of Black men has made Black men hyper self-conscious around manhood and masculinity. And between all of those issues, the Black community had not addressed in an engaging way the existence of same-gender loving people. So that also led some Black people who even kind of like Black people a little bit to go over to the white racist gay community for some kind of affirmation around their sexuality. So I said to myself, okay, this is crazy for Black people to have to endure a racist paradigm, to have to endure being ignored or critiqued in the confines of Black community and culture. And I'm going to do something to bring same-gender loving people within the geographical location of Black people, where we can meet where we live, or where most of us live, and not only learn to love and acknowledge ourselves inside of a Black community context, but be seen and recognized by the rest of the Black community as part of the Black family. And along with that, I wanted there to be language that not only taught us to love ourselves in our own image, but that would have other people in our community understand that loving is one of our interests, one of our goals, and our capacity. And that's also who we are as part of the Black collective, loving people, same gender loving people. And I'll tell you a story that kind of makes my point. In the late 1990s, I forgot the date now. I got to get it so I can be more accurate with this story. But in the late 1990s, when the Black Men's Exchange set up shop in South Central Los Angeles, which was predominantly Black, we had started setting up shop in the late 1980s. But by the time the 1990s came, we had a center called the Amasi Center for Black Wellness and Culture, an edifice and cultural center for all kinds of Black people. So the Nation of Islam, LA chapter, heard about the Black Men's Exchange and heard that it was made up of homosexual, bisexual, same-gender loving Black men. They called us out. And they called us out basically to attack and I guess shame us, if you will. And Marla Gibbs, who used to be on a show called 227, had a cultural center in the Leimert Park area of Los Angeles. And she allowed us to use this huge center for the debate between the Black Men's Exchange, same-gender loving Black men's organization, bisexual same-gender loving Black men's organization, and the Nation of Islam, who many of you might know who that is, Louis Farrakhan, etc. To make a long story short, it was sponsored by KJLH, which was owned by Stevie Wonder. So to make a long story short, we won the debate. And the reason we won the debate is because the guy who was the adversary or the con, his name was Lalila Africa. He died last year. He didn't have his facts correct. His whole position was based on white folks and white homosexuals and what white gays had did. And my whole presentation was based on Black folks and Black history. The only time I even referenced white people was to inform Black people on why they were anti-homosexual, because they had been taught to be so by King James and by the European insurrection against homosexuality, which the King James Bible is a part of that insurrection. And I had to let them know that your anti-homosexual attitudes, particularly when it comes to religion, came from white folks and from Europe, not from Black folks. So I broke all that down and other things, and we essentially won the debate. Well, after that situation occurred, the Nation of Islam had become started to become very, very respectful of us and totally changed their attitude. And it also led to in 2005, many years later, for Minister Farrakhan to invite same-gender loving people to speak at the Million Man March, in which I was asked, and I was the first openly same-gender loving person to speak at such an event. And that's on Google, it's on the YouTube if you want to find it, me speaking at the Million Man March. Now, all that was the answer to a question that I forgot that you asked. But anyway, I hope it was helpful in terms of...
No, it's very helpful. It's very
SGL.
helpful.
It was about SGL, yeah. So SGL, I remember my closing story now that I remember the question about SGL. At the end of the debate, which is why I brought it up in the first place, when I got into the lobby, of course, people were circling me to thank me and affirm the debate and congratulate us for winning and all this kind of stuff. Pardon, my roommate has just joined the video. Anyway, she's a Chihuahua. There she is. Anyway, an older woman, I would imagine she was in her late 70s or in her 80s. She was on a cane, and she pointed at me, and she asked the young gentleman who was with her, who was much younger, so I assume it either was her grandson or great-grandson, I don't know. But he escorted her over to me, and she said, "Baby, I really appreciated your comments." She said, "But it was something that you kept saying that kept that kept hitting me in my mind, and that really stood out to me. And I said, "Thank you, ma'am. What are you referring to?" She said, "You kept saying same gender loving." She said, "You kept on saying same gender loving like it was a real word." And I said, "Ma'am, all words are made by people. So all words that human beings decide to use become real words because human beings make up words. They come from not birds and bees and trees. They come from human beings, and they're literally made up by humans. And then they become part of popular use. They become quote unquote real words." So I said, "Same gender loving is indeed a real word." She said, "Well, what kept hitting me is that when I thought about homosexuals, I thought of perversion. I thought of people getting caught up in sex. I thought of perversion and sex. The word love or loving never, ever, ever crossed my mind when I thought of y'all." She said, "But because of your presentation, I have a different perspective on this issue." And she said, "You're never too old to learn anything." And she asked me, because she gave me a hug. She gave me a hug, bless her heart. And she told me thank you, and she walked away. But what was powerful about that was that loving, being part of how we reference ourselves, is very powerful. Not only because people who are external to us can realize that we have the capacity to love and we're not just perverted, but a lot of us forget about our interest, capability, and drive to love because of internalized oppression, and or disappointed with working with being around other self-hating people who sexualize who we are and not deal with the love piece because of frustration with this community.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very important story to me, and one of my favorites, because she was so cute, bless her heart. And she said that hearing the word loving had a big impact on her. So that kind of gives you some explanation around same gender loving.
Well, Doctor, that leads to my experience ever since I've identified with same gender loving. It's like I'm more welcome within the Black community ever since I said the word same gender loving. It's like when I used to say I was gay, I was more ostracized. I noticed the difference in the difference in the energy, the difference in the flow. But ever since I identified same gender loving, what is that? And then I break it down to what it means. And then there's a lot of, I get a lot of respect, a lot of admiration. And it's like, well, wow, I did not know this existed. Where does it come from? Then I'm always referencing you, Dr. Manago, where it comes from. And to me, it's a sense of healing. And words do have power and meaning, going back to what you just said. And saying that I'm same gender loving and caring about Blackness, not just, within the Black American, standpoint, but Blackness all over the world. Because traveling all throughout the world has healed me in so many different ways because of internalized oppression that I experienced, via the world that we lived in.
Yeah.
And ever since I've identified with same gender love, it allows me to reach out to other Black people that we don't know that is here. Yeah. In 2017, I did the first Kwanzaa event with the Afro-Argentine people in Argentina. And that for the last 130 some years after they were taken off the registry in Argentina, in the early 19th century, where the Argentine government wanted to whiten up the population. And Argentina is one of these countries that successfully practiced eugenics, where they wanted to whiten the country so much, so they sent the Black man off the war to fight the War of Independence, which a lot of them, got killed, and some Afro-Argentines left, the country, but there was a lot of Black women in Argentina. And historically speaking, if we look at, Italian men, they've always had affinity for darker colors. Right. Ethiopia. So bringing them to Argentina, that the president at the time knew that. So they were like kids in the candy store. So that's what led to the practice of miscegenation, which lightened the Afro-Argentine people to where they are now. However, they never lost that Blackness. They were fighting for it for years until Argentina got embarrassed, and now they're back on the registry in 2010. And when I went to go visit the Department of the Registry in Buenos Aires, the guy told me only 1 million people know that they're Black. And, he broke down the demographics of where they came from, like Cape Verde's in the 1960s. And, the Afro-Argentine people who are descendants of slaves. He's like, yeah, it's 1 million, but let me tell you this. He's like, I'm Black, and there's more of us. I may not look it because I did my DNA test. I'm like, oh. So going back to same gender loving, knowing your identity within yourself, within your philosophy, that, I mean, this brings about a lot of healing.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and Doctor, I want to go ahead and open the floor up to my audience to ask some questions, because you and I can go all day, and I don't want to, and I'm long-winded, and I don't want to take up all the time. But I would like to open this up to the audience, and it doesn't matter what order, just go ahead and go.
Well, while they're pondering their question, I did want to make a quick comment. Is that fine?
Oh, that's great.
Okay. There's a lot of people in our community, I'm talking about same-gender-loving folks, who are wounded because of a lack of acknowledgement or religious persecution or a hyper-masculine entity, male or female, in their lives that made them feel self-conscious about loving other men, or in some instances being feminine. And because white people have trained us to look at ourselves through a racial lens instead of through a human lens, we racialize ourselves. For example, nobody says the equivalent of "sit your black ass down" or those kind of, or the N-word, in terms of using a white supremacist insult as a normal part of how we reference each other. No other group does that in the Western world except for people of African descent, because of the 200-something year domestication process. So as a result of the anti-whiteness that has been embedded in us through torture and brutality, and the issues around manhood, femophobia, hyper-masculine concerns and demands that are a subset of the castration and abuse of Black men, including through police brutality and incarceration, there's some same-gender-loving Black people who don't like SGL because they claim the goal of it is to hide gay. And I'm glad that you have said the things that you've said regarding the intentionality of SGL, because it has nothing to do with hiding anything. I have been out as a same-gender-loving person almost my whole life. Matter of fact, I've never even been in the closet in my life, but I don't do gay. And because of my so-called masculine appearance, and I don't do gay, and rumors and stuff that are misinformation about everything, there's conclusions that can be made. And one of them have been made that SGL is to hide that you're so-called gay. And I just want to say, in case those people watch this video, that no, when you're saying that you're same gender loving and you put same gender love in there, you ain't hide nothing. The person who has pretty much raised that idea to the larger culture is not in the closet, and there's no closet space in any of it. As a matter of fact, a lot of people hide behind gay who are struggling with being Black and who are struggling with Black people because they feel rejected by people, and they run the gay defensively. And those are the kind of people that will make the misdiagnosis of SGL as being some place to hide. No, SGL is an affirmation of being both same-gender loving, bisexual, fluid, and Black, and affirming it and acknowledging it. Gay Inc., INC is what I mean, Gay Incorporated, the gay paradigm does not care about, affirm, or acknowledge Blackness. As a matter of fact, all of its Black spokespersons have white people as a partner. Don Lemon, white partner. Wanda Sykes, white partner. Lee Daniels, white partner.
Karamo Brown.
Karamo Brown, white partner.
He's working with his partner now.
Well, he's between white men, but anyway.
Yeah, you know.
And the dude who was on the show Pose, which I've never seen the show Pose, but I know he's on there. What's his name? Billy something?
Billy Porter.
Billy Porter, white partner.
Yeah.
RuPaul, white partner. And there's no such thing as an accidental pattern. For example, on CNN, there are only three men who have a talk show. One is Don Lemon, one is Van Jones, and one is a comedian who's really tall. His name is W something, I forgot his name, but he's tall, he has a fro. All three of those men have white partners. All three of them. Again, there's no such thing as an accidental pattern. Even things that look Black are really people who are Black appointed by white people to perpetuate white supremacy and blackface. For example, the show Precious, which some of us saw. I'll close by saying this because I want to hear from people myself, but I want people to decode these white supremacist norms. In the show Precious, it had three heroes. One was Mariah Carey. One was the guitar player, musician, whose name I can't think of. And one was Paula Patton. All three of them are half white.
Mhm.
All three of the heroes and Precious are half white, and that's not how the woman who wrote Sapphire, which is what Precious is based off. She didn't write those characters as half white in her book; they were just black.
Mhm.
But Lee Daniels, who loves white folks and who have some anti-black struggles, made those people, those heroes. He had to make them black because it was a black story, but he made them half white. So I want people to understand how white supremacy works in terms of even black people who are anti-black because of their mental state can be the Trojan horse for white supremacy.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Doctor, before anybody asks any questions, because I can decode it in everything. Even just on the scale of, Daniel Cameron, the Attorney General for Kentucky. He's the Benedict Arnold of the black community and all that.
He has a white wife, right?
White wife. And the thing is, speaking of my past, I've dated white men before and other races of men. And I'm not saying, some of them were bad, some of them were eye-opening. And it realized that within the relationship, they still had this sort of superiority attitude that they were better than me, that they knew more than me. They're dating me because I had one to tell me I was a palatable Negro. I was, acceptable.
Right.
That's why, they dated me. And the thing is, they're very intentional.
They're very, very intentional.
So white supremacy is very insidious, intentional. And I'm at the point in my life where I just call it out or I just, ignore it. And to protect my energy, my spirit, my peace, I don't congregate in a place where I'm the only one. And I say that intentionally. I do not put myself in positions where I'm the only black. Because what happened, and sorry for interrupting, because I went to a majority white school system. I've been in situations where when you're the only one, I've experienced that white people and other races of people who are non-black, who are non-white felt, they felt this position of power to say what they want to say because they noticed I'm the only one because I had no representation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to just make it clear that it might sound this way to people who are self-conscious, but I'm not giving any recommendations on who to date or anything like that. I'm talking about white people's agendas. I'm talking about, I just came up with a list of almost 10 black people who are in the media, all who have white partners.
But that's 50 more.
Exactly. I'm talking about what white people do and the decisions they make. I doubt if RuPaul, Van Jones, or Lee Daniels, or the dude in Kentucky, all of them made a decision on behalf of white folks on a conscious basis to be with white people. I'm talking about the choices white people make in terms of who they put in charge because they know that black person has their back because they love white folks.
And
so I'm talking about patterns here.
And they know that. They're very and I agree with that. That's what I was getting at. They know that it's very intentional because the white guys I've dated before I went on this thing of this is not going to happen anymore, they've told me that we've dated you because yes, you're black, but you're acceptable, or you're black because I was looking for this. So all of it had intention. That's what I want to put out there. I'm not trying to tell people who to date, who you can't love, because again, everybody has a choice. But at the same time, you have a choice to understand people's motives. Why? And even to this day, I have white men to this day, or any other race of men, want to pursue me. And my mind, I get really analytical. Like, okay, why? Well, what is your motive? What is your purpose? Because my thing is, because of what I've been through, because of those traumatic experiences, and because of what I'm living at, there's nothing wrong. And Doc, I'm going to go ahead and say this flat out. There's nothing wrong with dating somebody that look like you. It's healthy. What's wrong with racial pride? Because with a black man, and I've dated black men way before dating white men, because black men are my first love. Not saying that things were always great, but at the same time, I didn't have to worry about racism. I didn't have to worry about internalized oppression because we can telepathically look at each other in public and know what's going on. I don't have that freedom and that experience. I can't have that with any other race of men, and I'm just being quite honest. Because I said I want us to have a real dialogue, and I want to go ahead as the leader of these two organizations, I want to go ahead and facilitate that for my audience. Keep it real, keep it honest, and please ask some questions.
I have a question. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
My question to you, Dr. CeeLo, is at what point and or how do we address the situation and change the situation? For example, I could attest to this. I don't know if you're familiar with South Florida, and there's this city called Wilton Manors. Wilton Manors is predominantly white. They're not, and they are identified as a homosexual city, as a gay city. The days that, again, I want to go out and hang out with my own kind of people, that's the place I'm going to. But again, they're predominantly white though. Now, if I want to go out and hang out with the African Americans, the Black people, I'm going to fly to Atlanta and then hang out with them. Because again, like, you don't have that, like, so it's like, okay, in order for me to have fun and not feel like, again, I'm being watched, or like, oh, there's a Black dude in the white club, why is he here? Like, how do we address the situation and or correct this? Where do we begin to correct the situation?
Well, if you are a Black dude in the white club, that's what's happening. There's nothing to correct. It's white, and you're in there, and you're Black. So that's just a real basic description of the facts. You're not going to change whiteness from anything but whiteness. And you've made some choices, which I think are the best choices for you in terms of when you want to be around Black people, you got to go where Black people are. You probably don't always have the time or the ticket or the gas or the energy or the schedule to fly to Atlanta every time you want some Black experience. But I would imagine that you can't be the only Black person in your area. I mean, you might want to build a Black specific support system, like the Black Men's Exchange, which the facilitator here is familiar with, is willing to help Black people wherever you are create a network interface to support each other and meet each other. So that's a solution, frankly, a potential solution to bringing other Black people out of the woodwork, because you create an opportunity or a social event or a online event that's specifically for your folks. But ain't nothing you can do, or pardon me for sounding less scholarly by saying there isn't anything that you can do about white spaces. They're white spaces. And white spaces stay white spaces, not unless they leave it to go gentrify someplace else. So, I mean, you are asking what to do. All you can do where you are, where there's not that many Black people, is create some type of space for your people. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, you could do that at your apartment. You can do that on the campus. There's places where you can say, calling all same-gender-loving Black people, we want to find each other, we want to meet each other. Let's meet at the so-and-so, wherever that is, and make it a monthly or bi-weekly or weekly thing. You understand what I'm saying?
And to touch on that, Doctor, that's why I started the Same Gender Loving's Affinity group. And Matthew, I would like for you to be a part of that, and I'm going to send a link to everybody to join. And our heterosexual allies can join too as well. And Doctor, you hit on a key point. You can't change nothing that's already has some type of economic autonomy. And what I mean by that is, if you go to any white gay silos, here in South Florida, or you go to Castro in San Francisco, or any place in the world, you will never see Black businesses there, and it's done by intention. You'll never see a lot of, and it's pretty intentional, because in Wilton Manors, when I did go out every once in a while, I'm always getting into some type of conflict, not because I'm starting it, it's the fact that I'm with Black people that want to hang out there, and it's always somebody white or non-Black wanting to join our conversations without introducing themselves. So what I get from that is power and privilege. I don't have to introduce myself or acknowledge your humanity to join your conversation. And with me, that ain't gonna happen, because I shut it down real quick. And that's why those conflicts happen. But at the same time, I would find that self-hating Black person who's with their white or non-Black or non-white or whatever counterpart, and they're always jumping in defense. And with that, I don't argue no more, because I mean, I don't argue with self-hating Black people anymore, for the fact that why you gonna, it's just like blaming a victim of an accident, a car wreck, for being hurt. People have to go through their own journeys, and for the last 7 years, I've been hanging around holistic Black people who have my same mindset. And that's where my healing came from, man.
Got it. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Absolutely.
Can I ask a question
You sure can.
to the young man who just spoke?
Hi, yes.
How you, even when you're in Atlanta, how would you describe the state of the community or population of same-gender loving Black folks, or known because of white influences, gay identified Black folks? How would you describe the state of this community, the way it feels, and it's the state of it? I mean, how would you, the condition of this community, how would you describe it?
For me, there are two spectrums. There's the spectrums of, you have the group that says, hey, this is why us Blacks don't have anything, it's because we're going to mess it up. We have that spectrum. And then you have the other spectrum of, again, you're trying to support, you do have that support team. You do have that bond, that brotherlyhood as same gender loving individuals. And it's just, again, it's like, they're both far on the spectrum. And I guess I don't know where the middle is at on trying to appease both sides.
Well, which one would you say is the most rampant? The, for lack of a better term, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the dysfunctional, divided team, or the one that's more constructive and thoughtful? Which one is the most prevalent and the most present? Tell the truth.
I want to say the dysfunctional.
Yeah.
I want to say that the more the dysfunctional one is. And again, because, and again, only because because I live in South Florida, I see it present. Yes, I do have my group of friends that, yeah, we do hang out. Again, it's majority African-American individual, African-American males. There was this book club that I was a part of that was in Wilton Manors. It's called Brothers Speak. Yes. I didn't do it. That was like a long time ago. Every Wednesday was rough for me, from driving from Boca to Wilton Manors. But again, to answer your question, in South Florida, I do see the dysfunctional is more prevalent now, because again, it's like, if I'm texting my friends, it's like, oh, what's the crowd like? And if I can't get the right answer that I need, then okay, yeah, I don't think I'm going. So yeah,
Okay.
to answer your question.
Well, I have been asking that question for decades, and the answer tends to be the same, because from my perspective, gay identity and gayness does not motivate unity, cooperation, support, and cohesion between us. It keeps us fragmented or lackadaisical, and it's not really helpful to us. And I think that's part of the problem. Like I said, once upon a time, we were a lot more positive with each other. And this whole gay assimilation, or LGBTQ and oh my God, queer, which I can't stand seeing Black people call themselves that, has really interrupted our capacity to have each other's back and be there for each other, because it's really a assimilational identification. It doesn't affirm Black people. It affirms white people, which is why it does very well for them. But yeah, thank you for answering my question, because I just wanted to know, because I wanted to see if it's going to be different where you are, but it's not. That's what I hear, a similar answer no matter where I ask that question in this country. So thank you.
We
We have work to do.
You're welcome.
Sorry for interrupting. We have Rosen. Z has her hands up.
Hello, y'all. Sorry about being late. I just left from another meeting, but I'm really glad to be here to learn more about the same gender loving community. I'm Rose and T. Gordon. You can also call me Ro. My pronouns are Z, Zer, and Zers. And I'm a student at Florida International University. I'm double majoring in Women's and Gender Studies and Latin American and Caribbean Studies.
Nice to meet you, sister.
Oh, by the way, I'm non-binary. I'm not a woman.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Nice to
you
meet
can
you.
call me sibling. Yeah, so sibling or brother, either of those two works.
Nice to meet you, brother sibling.
Dr. With Z, I go through the same struggle, so you're not the only one. The next one we have Daquan Starling with his hands up.
I'm muted. Okay, can you all hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. Hi, Doctor. Hi, everyone. My name is Jaquan Starling. I'm a junior studying mechanical engineering here at FIU. And Dr. Cleo, I want to thank you for coming out and talking to us. My question is, have you ever come across non-Black people who try to identify underneath the term same gender loving, and what's your response to that?
Well, thank goodness that's very, very rare. Very, very rare. Because as I mentioned before, white gays have gay, and LGBTQ and rainbow flags and triangles and queer from Britain. They have a paradigm that serves them, that has gotten them same-sex marriage. They've been able to successfully eradicate HIV relative to other communities, particularly Black men. Now they're pushing the issue of trans as part of their goals to make sure that becomes a normal part of the culture in the society. So they're quite successful. See, they don't, I rarely have ever, I've experienced it. Just about I've experienced white folks with locks. You know, you've seen white folks with locks. I've experienced, just the other day, I was in the elevator and we both had on our masks. It was a white woman and she was talking about how she was complaining about her husband and called him a grown ass man. And I said, do you know that the term grown ass comes from Black folks? And she was like, really? I said, yeah, terms like grown ass man and something being the bomb and old school, those are all Black terms. She was like, I figured it was, but I like black stuff. So there's some white folks who admit they like Black stuff. That's why, as Travis said earlier, I don't use the word white dominant. I use the words white dominating, because the domination of Black culture and style is everywhere. And we definitely are a dominant part of the United States framework in terms of our presence. So they might be dominating, but they're not dominant. But again, getting back to your question, that rarely happens. So I haven't had enough experience with that to come up with a cogent answer. Most of the white folks I run into are proudly gay, queer, or LGBTQ.
Or non-binary or other elements.
Yeah.
Well, I have a follow-up question. Yeah, because I remember seeing on it was an official LGBT Plus website, and you were like, yeah, same gender loving includes African Americans and Latinos, and I'm just like, wait, I was sure about it including non-Black Latinos. So yeah, so that's false, right?
What's that again?
Like, same gender loving doesn't include non-Black Latinos. Is that correct?
No.
No.
It includes Afro-Latinos.
That's why I put Afro-descendant identified.
Okay, that's what I thought. And then my second question, is it specific to African Americans, or can Black people in general identify as same gender loving?
Well, the predominant people that have taken it on and who was developed and honored for are same gender loving, bisexual, and gender nuanced people, Black. I have met a heterosexual male once who told me on a panel, well, I'm same gender loving too. I love my father. I love my brother. I said, okay. I said, well, you know, if you want to imply that you love them the way I'm talking about loving them, that's interesting. But No, you don't. You know darn well you don't go around calling yourself same gender loving. So stop trying to bogart to neutralize a term because you rather call Black people who are homosexual gay because you really prefer to throw us in a white pile because you want to be dismissive.
No, what I meant was like African Americans as opposed to like those like descended from like in the US versus say like me, like I'm Jamaican. So like my parents are from Jamaica. So like Afro Caribbean people, can they also identify as same gender loving, or is it specific to like African Americans?
No. It's African people wherever you're from. As a matter of
Okay,
fact,
got it.
if you go to Ghana, I run into same gender loving people who are actively calling themselves same gender loving. No, see, no. Let me make something clear. I'm gonna get passionate here. As far as I'm concerned, you are my brother. Okay, period. Caribbean, African, Afro-Latino, we are connected, profoundly connected, and you look like a family member to me. So there's no separation from my perspective.
I wanted to bring this up because Jaquan brought up something interesting. This is the HRC website. And to decode Blackness, because as we're decoding white supremacy out of our lives as same gender loving people, they decode us continuously. And I wanted to put up the website, although the director and the CSO of HRC is a Black man who's from Africa, but you know, that's another story within itself. But the definition they put is a term someone prefer to use instead of lesbian, gay, or bisexual to express attraction to and love people of the same gender. So what they did was they unblacked it. Let me say this. They whitened the term of same gender loving. And
That's
that
right.
is the definition. I just wanted to point that out with these allies who say we're an ally of the SGL. You're not really an ally. You're trying to erase me and other components of my identity.
That's right. And HRC, I don't care if they have a director from Mars. It's a white organization. It affirms and uplifts whiteness, and its paradigmatic and hegemonic focus is whiteness. And a lot of white people, including CNN and other people, have brought in Black faces with white traces.
Black faces, white traces. I'm gonna quote you on that.
Yeah, they do that on purpose because they know they can control them. And also, this is one of the reasons why Joy Reid is still at MSNBC, but they got rid of Tamron Hall and they got rid of Melissa Harris Perry, is because some white people look at Black people who are not from the United States and who don't have the chattel slavery history in a direct sense here as safer and less hostile to them because they have a whole nother cultural reverberation than domestication by white folks. So they bring in Black people who look Black because they are Black or African descent, but who come from a non-American background. And there's a whole different type of energy because people from the Caribbean, for example, and from Africa still have some direct African cultural phenomena. Food, language, accents, practices, because they weren't fully domesticated and they had a different relationship to white supremacy than African Americans have, who had no sanctuary from whiteness at all, which is why we don't even have an African memory in most cases. So they're the one who designed the chairs on the deck for their purposes. And I like Joy Reid, so I'm not saying that put Joy Reid down. Joy Reid probably don't even know what I'm talking about in terms of why she's there, but I know why she's there, and I know why Melissa Harris Perry is not.
Come on, we know we got some more questions. Keep it going.
I don't have a question, but I just like I remember when they got rid of Dr. Perry, like, and she was talking about how like she has a whole doctorate in the area of like political science, and they replaced her with like a white man to cover the elections, and it was like it was so disturbing, like, but not surprising, but it was like wow, like, and people have this idea that, oh, if you have all these qualifications, like, then you know that's gonna like automatically your experiences are gonna be better. Like your experiences will be better to an extent, but that's not going to stop altogether you experiencing like misogyny in her case.
Look, Joe Biden just got finished interviewing Cardi B as part of a political discussion instead of a political scientist, a social scientist, an expert on the political system. They interviewed Cardi B. So that's what they don't interview people based on their expertise. They interview based on how it's going to help white supremacy, the mythology of white supremacy.
Tiffany, I know you got questions. Tiffany Peacock, Madam Peacock.
I guess just like one of the things that I was wondering is because you had spoken earlier and said that you disagree with the identity of queer, and I kind of wanted you to talk a little bit more about that.
Okay. Well, disagree might be one way of interpreting it, but it's not simply disagreement, which is an intentionally divisive perspective. I am for the affirmation of Black people. I am for Black people referencing themselves in ways that affirm, motivate, and embrace us. Because I know for a fact that communities that have the capacity to embrace themselves are doing better than us. As a matter of fact, Caribbean and African-born Americans do better than African Americans in terms of family, in terms of having each other's back, in terms of jobs, and building a lineage of economic success, because people from the Caribbean and from Africa have more connection to the idea of family and family connection than African Americans more and more, because we're trained to be separated. So, and they're not like ourselves. And we have no cultural frame of reference outside of whiteness. So anything that's going to further affirm Black people as white assimilated or carrying white supremacy as the alleged superior way of being and thinking, I'm not for it. And LGBTQ, lesbian from Greece and gay from Paris and queer from Britain, from white folks, from racist white folks, it doesn't make any sense for us to wrap ourselves up in white supremacist constructs, particularly given the history that we have as people of African descent, which does actually affirm us, but we don't know the history. Like, have you ever heard of Kabaka Mwanga? Have you heard of Hatshepsut? Well, Hatshepsut is a woman who was born a woman, but who identified as male and was a pharaoh of Egypt, which used to be called Kemet before white people took over. And a lot of trans people in the Black community don't know nothing about Hatshepsut, let alone everybody else. Kabaka Mwanga, who you can look up, Kabaka Mwanga, Mwanga, was the king of Uganda, which used to be called Buganda, who was a same-gender loving bisexual king who had both male and female lovers, who affirms us in terms of being a person who is bisexual and same-gender loving. In our history, you don't know nothing about them. And these people preceded gay and lesbian by hundreds, in some instances, thousands of years. And then there's the tomb of Khnum-Hotep and his partner, who was buried in the 8th dynasty of Kemet. And they were a same-gender loving couple who were buried together thousands of years before there was even a Europe. But you know nothing about it. But you know about Ellen DeGeneres. You know about Elton John and white folk stuff. And there's nothing wrong with knowing anything about anything, but know about yourself. And queer and gay and all that kind of stuff not only does not teach you about yourself, but it discourages you. It discourages you or blocks you from even considering learning about yourself as a person of African descent with a history more rich than any other people on the continent. And I'll close with reiterating that the LGBT queer culture community does not affirm or respect Black people. That's why everybody that I listed earlier in this show who has some level of fame, every one of them was somebody white. Because if you're loving Black people, they don't like you to be in the mix. I've already mentioned, and I'm being repetitive to make my point, that the three men who have a show on CNN all have white partners.
Don Lemon.
Don Lemon, Lee Daniels, Billy Porter, Wanda Sykes, RuPaul, and I'm forgetting some names now, but they all have white partners. That's not an accident. That's the result of queer and gay.
Todrick Hall.
Yeah.
The rock star.
So I want you to see the patterns, and I want you to see the result of gay and queer. And I'm going to mention 2 other people, and you might figure out who they are, but I'm not going to say their names because they didn't give me permission to, but you might figure out who they are. There's a famous Black woman actress who's a really talented actress. Well, I can tell you this part about her because this is public. Queen Latifah performed at the Long Beach Gay and Lesbian Festival. You can go online and you can find this. She performed one year, and I forgot what year it was, but Queen Latifah was the featured act, a performer at the Gay Pride Festival in Long Beach. The next day, white folks ran to their newspapers and said, Queen Latifah comes out as gay. Queen Latifah said, no, I did not come out as gay. I supported your event. And what Queen Latifah meant by that was, I'm not doing this lesbian and gay rainbow stuff, but I'm a same-gender loving person, but I'm not doing that. That's not who I am. I'm supporting your event, but don't call me that. Then there's another guy that you probably heard of. God, what was his? Ocean. Somebody Ocean. What's his first name?
Frank Ocean.
Say it again. Frank Ocean. When Frank Ocean wrote a love song on one of his albums to a male that he was in love with. So the white gay community tried to seduce him and bring him into their fold like they did Queen Latifah. And they gave him an award. GLAAD, who I'm sure some of you may have heard of, gave him an award. He didn't show up to get the award. He was like, I'm not, I ain't doing this rainbow flag gay stuff. I'm loving a man, but I'm not doing that. And you cannot say, now that you're irrational, that Frank Ocean and Queen Latifah, or even me, Cleo Manago, are in the closet. We just don't do white folks gay stuff to frame who we are.
Let me piggyback off of that real quick, and it's kind of a question. And I guess I'm regurgitating my question in a different way, so probably I could get a different answer. It goes back to the question of, we are answering the question when it's presented to us, but we're not addressing the problem. So like, how do we address the problem? Because again, like, fine, like, yeah, you're gonna say, oh, he's Black in a gay club, but no, Matthew, okay, so won't you make a Black-owned gay club in the middle of Wilson Manor? So like, that was my earlier question, like, because it's like, again, we're only answering the question, but we're not addressing the question and trying to find a better resolution to the problem.
So redefine the problem and then re-ask the question, and I might be able to give you a better answer. What's the problem and what's the question?
Well, just like you said, let's use Queen Latifah. She went to this so-called white event. White Caucasian individual said, oh, she's calling herself gay. But she's like, no, I'm not a lesbian. I'm not gay. I'm just here to support you. You've only answered the question, or you've only like addressed the question, but you haven't addressed the problem.
What's the problem?
Okay, Queen Latifah. So if you're going to answer the question, go ahead. But I guess more so, I'm trying to figure out how to put this in.
Just say it, brother. Just say it.
If somebody gets me, please, by all means, jump in. I'm trying to.
Don't be politically correct. Just say it. You're amongst Black people.
I don't know. It's just like, okay, we're addressing the problem, but like, I mean, we're addressing the question, but address the problem. Like,
what's the problem? That's what I'm asking you. What is the problem?
I think I understand what Matthew is saying. It's basically like, we're like, okay, like people are saying, okay, they're not part of that community, but then maybe because they're not really explaining like why, like they're not part of the community. Is that what you're going for?
Yes, in layman terms, yes. Like, okay, so Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. That's where I'm going with this.
Okay, let me respond to that. First of all, you've heard of Luther Vandross?
Yes.
Yes.
I used to know Luther Vandross when he was alive. And I remember, I don't know if you've ever heard of David Geffen, but David Geffen is a huge record industry mogul. He's also a gay-identified white man who, over the years, has given millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars to what essentially is a white gay movement. And I was one time hanging out with Luther, who knows David, or who knew David. And David had given all this money, and it was in the newspapers that David Geffen gave this gazillion dollars. I think it was to the Los Angeles Gay and Lesbian Center in Hollywood. And just to be inquisitive, I said, Luther, who was not out, by the way, at this point, and was never out during his career. And the reason that he was not out is another conversation that I may or may not get into. I don't want us to get to lose the point. The thing I asked, I said, Luther, you got all this money, you ain't got no children, you got more money than you ever need. Why don't you consider doing what David Geffen did and give support same-gender loving Black people? And he said that I'm afraid of that because the community is not organized. Remember earlier, young brother, you talked about how messy the community was? Remember you said that?
Yes.
Luther said, I don't want to be in that mess. Luther said, he said, when David Geffen gives money, David Geffen will be affirmed for because he has a huge white infrastructure that has media and politics that will support him. As a same-gender loving Black person, he didn't have that. And he felt like he might wind up in some mess if he did something like that. So he didn't want to do that. So that's the answer when it comes to him. But what Luther Vandross, and this is different from David Geffen, what Luther Vandross and Queen Latifah and Frank Ocean have in common is that they're entertainers. They're not politicians. They're not political activists. They're not activists. David Geffen is an activist, a white gay activist. Luther, Queen Latifah, and Frank Ocean are performers. They're not activists. What they need is a same-gender loving, demonstratively present, powerful, healthy culture to go to and rely on so they can have some place to lay their head for who they are as same-gender loving people. But part of the answer to your question in terms of what's missing and what's not being said is that these people are not activists. That's not what they are. People think because they're famous that they have a political activist perspective, but they don't. Maybe one day Queen Latifah will get more into why she does not identify, but she's very Black. She's very Black affirming. And because of the interruption of white gayness and the vulnerability of same-gender loving Black people who don't have the infrastructure that whites have because we're so busy chasing behind whites, which keeps us unstable, they don't have a community to come to and support. And that's what Luther Vandross was saying. Like, there's no community for me to support. It's a mess right now, and I do not want to have no association with no mess. And even you said earlier that when you talk about, what happens in something Manor, whatever that area is that you talk about in Florida,
Wilson Manor.
And when you talk about what's happening in Atlanta, there might be some exceptions to the mess, but primarily it's a mess in terms of building community. Part of one of the reasons why I accept invitations like this is to inspire us to understand the importance of building community and loving ourselves in our own image. Running behind queer and white and trying to find a comfort zone in a Black space a white space with just a Black trace, barely. It's not powerful enough to carry the weight of Blackness. So we have to do it ourselves. And maybe some of you involved in this will start helping to build that, because that's what's going to bring people like Queen Latifah and everybody else to a place of thinking about coming out, because they need a place to come out too. And right now, the infrastructure for that doesn't exist. But it can. I mean, SGL used to not exist. It exists now. The Black Men's Exchange, that once upon a time didn't exist. The Amasi Center for Black Wellness and Culture, where I'm the executive director, once didn't exist, but it exists now. So we can make things exist, but we have to have the consciousness. And my work, which is several decades old, much older than everybody on this call, it ain't in white folks' paradigm. It's Black. And when I first hung out with Luther Vandross and had this conversation, I didn't have the infrastructure that I have now, because he probably would have donated to.
Thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
Yes, I have a question. So I've seen some orgs, like when they saying LGBTQIA plus, include SGL, and then so like they'll be like LGBTQIA plus or SGL or something like that nature. So it should be to include the SGL community. And I want to get like your thoughts on it, because I can see both like the pros and cons. So like, how do you feel about it?
How do I feel about what, and the pro and cons of what?
Okay, so in like these organizations, like instead of only saying LGBTQIA plus, it'd be like LGBTQIA plus and SGL.
Well, I'm mixed about it. I mean, I think it's a good idea for them to acknowledge same-gender loving people. However, when they do it the way that Travis just described HRC doing it, it bothers me because it's a racist deduction of the essence and power and purpose of SGL. But those who are respectfully included, I think it's great. They should. It's a real phenomenon, and it should be included. But white people are very self-serving generally, so they don't include things that affirm Black people in its depth and weight and gravity and realness, because they want Black people to assimilate and help them build their movement for them. But again, when they respectfully acknowledge SGL and they do it in a respectful way that it's robust and accurate, I think it's great. It's not common. What HRC does is what's most common.
Go ahead, Tiffany Marshall. Can't hear you, Tiffany.
I said, why you have to put me on the spot?
Come on, New York.
I'm dead. Okay, so a question I really have, because I grew up in a same gender loving household. I've always been told like you're gonna be like your mom, and I think it made such like a negative cognitism on me, because it's like, why do I have to, just because I grew up in a same gender loving household doesn't mean that I'll necessarily be same gender loving. And then it's like, if I do end up becoming same gender loving, it's like, oh, I told you that's exactly what you're going to be. What are your views on children who have to grow up in, that environment?
Well, there's literally been some studies done on this. One doesn't come to mind, but I imagine that it would be relatively easy to find a study that investigated what happens to children with same-gender loving parents. And I remember correctly, like everybody else, same-gender loving people, or people who are exclusively in the people of the same gender, are a relatively small amount of the population, supposedly 10%. So 10% of couples, regardless of their sexuality, will likely have a same-gender loving child, which means, and this is what the science allegedly proves, and I say allegedly because I haven't investigated the science, that most same-gender loving people have heterosexual children. Because most people have heterosexual children, because most people are heterosexual. But it's very possible for a same gender loving couple, 10% at least, to have a same gender loving child. But they likely, according to the science, are not going to be same gender loving because their parents were same gender loving. They're same gender loving because they are. I mean, in contrast, as far as I know, both my parents were definitely heterosexual people, but I was a same gender loving child who knew that as early as 7 years old. Though I was constantly being referred to as likely heterosexual, your girlfriend, one day your wife, and that whole thing. That's all I heard as a child. And that was the assumption. But I knew when I heard it, no, that's not how I felt. So my point is that being raised a certain way doesn't necessarily impact how you're going to come out. Because if it did, I probably would be heterosexual, and I'm not. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand. It's just like, it just never really sat well with me because, like you said, like, within yourself, it's not based off how you were raised or what your household is like. Everyone has their own feeling towards who they feel towards. So I'm just glad to hear your opinion on that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that question. It was a great question.
We're going to have Joseph Emil introduce himself.
Yeah, sorry. Hi, my name's Joseph Emil. We call it, just graduated mental health counseling from FIU. So that's about it.
Greetings.
I don't know what else to say. Hello.
I see the fan is blowing your hair.
You got jokes. You got jokes. I left my yak in the other room, so I'm all right. Ain't no hair blowing.
So, Joseph, tell Dr. Cleo Manago how you heard about SGL and what are your opinions and thoughts of the sexual identity.
I heard about it through Travis. We call it. We've had many talks before. A very close friend. I heard about SGL through him. Just personally, as as a Black identity in this world, you always go along with what's mainly taught you, which is LGBT. So I mean, he told me about SGL, what it was, what it means, and I was like, okay. So I mean, right now my identity is more so gender fluid. So we call it, but the idea and the benefit to actually having SGL exist for individuals who would be associated with LGBTQ is it's a big move. I mean, it's something that we call it even within some of my projects in my graduate program. When we talked about LGBT and things like that, I would also make sure I brought that up. And a couple of my professors had asked, what was that? Especially some of my professors that were Black as well. They would ask about what that was. And I made sure I kind of implemented all my presentations because my main focus was veterans, the LGBTQ/SGL individuals. So I kind of used that, thanks to Travis, as a way to kind of, learn more about non-heterosexual populations and how they identify, how they choose to identify.
Great.
But going back on to, because I know Travis had mentioned one time about was it HRC, and just we call it. I don't even know the one that I did see the definition. That when you talked about it, it made me think about how it's funny how when something's okay. Prime example, when somebody talks about two-spirited, it's okay because you like, okay, well, it's innately we call it associated with indigenous populations. It's their thing. Obviously a white man can't be two-spirited because he's not of that culture. But then if a Black person decides to say I'm SGL, they don't get the same respect. You can't say, okay, this identity is from the Black culture, what do you call it? And we call it how they identify their non-heterosexual status in today's world. So when it comes to talking about two-spirited, it's automatic respect. But then when it comes to SGL, we call it's almost like them putting, it's African American identity, like, oh, you don't want to be a part of us. It's not about being a part of anything.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, and of course, I guess you can imagine that there's exceptions to that. I mean, I've gone places all over the world where SGL was profoundly embraced and respected. But you're right. I mean, when people mention two spirit, it's almost like a religious,
Right.
spiritual respect for it.
Hmm.
But this is a racist society. I mean, I know that's not news to you,
No,
but
of course not.
this is a society that's so racist. Black people are begging white folks, can we matter? You know, Black lives, please let Black
Right.
lives matter. Nobody else is doing that. The Asians ain't doing that. Latinos not doing that. Native Americans are doing it. We're the one begging to matter. Begging white folks, please let us matter. I'm not doing it. I'm not involved in that passive mantra and begging white
Right.
folks for nothing. But I'm saying to you that that desire or need to ask for to matter is part of the problem of racism. So they're used to being dismissive to us. So that's just the way they've been, because this is an anti-Black society.
Anti-Black world.
The Western world, yeah.
Yanda had a question.
I did, but I'm totally speechless. I mean,
Why are you speechless?
I feel like we have so much healing to do as a community, you know, with this, because just in the way we've separated ourselves, you know, with terminology, it's just so much that needs to be undone and talked about. And I don't think we make room for conversation like this enough. What can I do to facilitate that change with younger people? I work with a lot of teenagers in between ages 12 and 17.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you.
And some of them are having a lot of problems at home with their parents, you know, when it comes to, you know, religion. And I hear some of the most horrible things, like saying, one kid, he told his mom that, you know, well, sin is sin, because she was saying, you know, it's sin of this, and she told him that it was an abomination for him to be gay, or SGL, that we now know. But I mean, because when you bring it off as saying same gender loving, it has a whole different feel. You know, it feels good to even embrace that term. And if we can have conversations with parents and, you know, and talk with younger kids about this, you know, who are already sexually active within the community, and just, you know, get them to embrace themselves and not have the shame that comes with it. Because the self-hate is so real, and these kids are really suffering and struggling. And I really don't know how to bridge that gap.
Well, I have done a lot of work in my career around that. I've helped to bring together families who were torn apart by sexuality, from Christians to people in the Nation of Islam, from atheists, from macho, hyper male fathers and mothers who perpetuated what I call femophobia, fear of feminine people, particularly males. So I've done a lot of work on that, and I've trained my staff to do a lot of work on that. And we've made some great strides. For example, you may have heard of Al Sharpton, who used to be vehemently anti. He's not no more because of the work that I've done. A woman named Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, who you may not have heard of, but she used to be known as she's a brilliant psychiatrist, and she was known to be anti-homosexual. Well, she met with us at the Black Women's Exchange and totally changed her perspective. You might have heard of something called Afrocentricity, which was founded by Molefi Asante, who used to be the head of African Studies at Temple University in Philadelphia. He's now an ally. So, and I know you've heard of Minister Louis Farrakhan, who invited me to be an openly same-gender loving speaker at the Million Man March in 2005. So all of that came out of work that was done that resulted in a transformation or a change of heart. However, that change of heart was steeped in conversation that was Black affirming, not LGBT XYZ, but that was, or queer, but that was informed by the Black experience, and it included reference to Black experience and struggle as part of talking about being a same-gender loving person. It wasn't outside of the confines of being Black. It was part of a discussion about being Black. And that whole approach just blew their minds. I remember Dr. Welsing saying, I didn't know there was such thing as a black homosexual who was pro-black. I said, oh yeah. I mean, because they saw Lee Daniels and this list of people running behind white folks. And they thought they thought we were all running behind white folks because white people control the narrative. But they learned through this work that that's not the truth. Getting back to these children who are victimized by white religiosity called Christianity and what King James did, those kids need an education on religion so they can stop giving it credibility.
Okay.
They also need to understand that a lot of what's being said, allegedly from the Bible about homosexuality, is not true. The person called Jesus never critiqued homosexuality. And the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is not about homosexuality. There's literally the rape of girls in that story. And it's about being unhospitable and some horrible behavior that came from angels and all kinds of people in that community. It's not a homosexuality story. So when people hear that, they're hearing misinformation. And I've heard people say, and you probably heard people say, but thou shalt not lay with the man as they do with the woman. You've heard that before, right?
Yes, I have.
And I say, no, I lay with the man as I do with a man, not with a woman. So we got that covered. I'm not laying with the man as I would with the woman. I'm laying with the man as I would with the man. And the same gender-loving woman is laying with the woman as she would with the woman. She's not laying with a man. So she got that. So she's covered. She got y'all covered. What y'all saying is not what's going on here. So my point to you is that people need to be educated. The Bible says don't eat shrimp. You know, the Bible says women, when they're having their period, should be cast out of the community and go somewhere and bleed. And we ain't doing none of that because it was based on a time that we're not in now, that was more oppressive of women. The parts of the Bible that were written by women were either taken out or renamed with a man's name because of patriarchy. So there's too much inconsistency, confusion, and patriarchal strategy in the Bible. And the word homosexuality did not even appear in the Bible at all until the late 60s, because some white religious people were concerned about homosexuality being accepted. So they put it in the Bible so they can create an angle in which to critique it from a religious perspective. But if you get a Bible from the 1960s and before, the word of homosexuality is not even in that book. And my PhD is in religious studies. So I know about religion and the construction of it and its impact on modern society. So people need to be educated. A lot of Black people who are very religious need those contradictions, about those contradictions. I mean, like I said, either you're gonna believe in the Bible or you're gonna keep on believing in new translations that are built by people with agendas. You know, make up your mind here. So education from a Black perspective is a key part of how to get people to wake up. But sometimes the parents are too stuck on, you know, whatever they're stuck in to make a transformation. So the children have to. They have to be educated. From a Black perspective, though, not no LGBTQ XYZ queer perspective.
We have Rosen Z, my sibling, hand up.
Yes. So I remember seeing a post that said that you can't be pro-Black with non-Black partners, like romantic and sexual partners. How do you feel about that take? Like, whether you agree or disagree, and like, why so?
I'm laughing because that's a very controversial perspective. And let me make sure I understand your question. You say that you saw online or saw somewhere that somebody said you can't be pro-Black and have a non-Black partner, right?
Yeah.
Now you asked me now, so get ready because you did ask.
I
Bring the grenade launcher.
I believe that authentic pro-Blackness means that you have the capacity to love somebody Black at home. If you don't have that capacity, and listen to me closely, because there's some people who are with people who are non-Black, like Travis. When Travis was with somebody who was non-Black, I don't think it was anti-Black. It was circumstantial, likely. But then he saw some anti-Blackness in it and went on about his business. So the point I'm trying to make to you is that there's some people who are circumstantially in a situation. I mean, if you go to China, it's real likely your partner going to be Chinese. You know, if you are in a place that's circumstantially whatever it is. But if you don't have the capacity to love somebody Black, and you're with somebody who's not Black for anti-Black reasons, no matter how much you talk, you are not pro-Black. And if you're pro-Black, in my opinion, you ultimately wind up with and back with somebody Black, because that's likely your preference if you're pro-Black. If Black people aren't your preference, you are not pro-Black. And there's a difference between, this is a difference between Bayard Rustin and James Baldwin. There's a difference between fighting against racism for better access to white folks and fighting against racism for Black power. There's a difference. And there's some of us who don't want to have any barriers to get into good old white people because we think they're superior and more beautiful and more this, that, and the other. And we fight against racism so we can, because we're mad about not being able to get our hands on them, because that's what we prefer to be around, because we're anti-Black. And then there's Black people who want their people to be respected, who want their people to have power, who look at white supremacy as an interruption of that potential, who fight against that. So I hope that made some sense.
Yes, thank you so much for your perspective.
I want to go ahead and chime in, Rosen, and tell my experience. My experience was circumstantial because I was in the Army. I'm from West Georgia, East Alabama. Most of my partners were Black men. I've dated Black men. But when I was stationed in Washington State, outside of Tacoma, the Black population was 3%, damn near non-existent. When I was stationed in Germany, yes, there are Black soldiers, but they were cisgender heterosexuals. So when I went through my transformation, when I dated these guys, I had an open mind, but they never had an open mind for me. They dated me because I had some acceptable qualities that were known as whites. I was called a palatable Negro from a partner I dated, or somebody who's non-Black wanted to date me because they had a Black fetish. And I saw that early on, and I ended those relationships quickly because it is normal, not telling people who to date and who you love, because I mean, people have their choice, but it is psychologically normal to want to date somebody that look like you and reference you mentally, spiritually, politically, ideologically, in those facets. And that's what I want to be with. And we're coming, I'm enjoying this. We're coming close to time because I don't want to keep Doctor too long because I want to talk to him afterwards. But do anybody got any closing questions? And Doctor, do you have anything else if people don't have questions?
Dr. Manago.
Sure.
Have you ever dated outside of your race?
In my lifetime, yes, I've dated people who are Asian. I've dated a white person once. I've dated Latino. I've dated Indian from India.
What was the
What was that?
You said it was.
They were all circumstantial. Yes.
Okay.
They were all circumstantial. My vital and most significant and consistent attraction with a capital A is brothers. I find brothers exquisitely beautiful. Anything else, Nosy?
I mean, I do want to add a comment. You know they do have Africans in China. So
well, absolutely. Africans are everywhere.
We everywhere.
But I know we're everywhere. I was just like with the Africans, because my friend, she's in China now, and her baby dad's African. Because I was like, I didn't know there was too many Africans in China, but she was saying they're going back and forth because some of them are coming from South Africa and other places because the Chinese are obviously invading Africa, and they can't even get jobs in their own country in their own language. So,
yeah, that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
But I want to quote a friend of mine named Conrad Pegu, who said, "Love may have no color, but self-love does."
True.
That's a perfect ending.
Self-love is your color.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Doctor, do you have any closing remarks?
Well, just the classic. You can find me on Facebook, at Cleo Manago. Join me on Twitter or Instagram at Cleo Manago. You can go to the amasi.org. Amasi is spelled Apple, Mary, Apple, Sam, I as an important.org. And see an overview of the work that I do with a diverse Black community. And you can look up the Black Men's Exchange and a lot of things connected to my name or use my name, and your computer might explode. So much stuff is gonna come up. Not everything I approve either in terms of what might come up. But I just want to reiterate that loving ourselves in our own image is intelligent, it's necessary, and it's the answer to our struggles and our challenges. And every group that's doing better than us as a culturally cohesive group are people who have the capacity to dip deep into their own cultural well to inform how they go forward. And you Asians have all these languages that they speak. Africans from Africa have all these languages that they speak. Latinos and other people have a cultural well that they can dip in. Black African Americans have a very limited well, and our memory has been assaulted by whiteness, and it has caused chaos in our communities and a lot of self-hate. And there's residue of that every place the whites have colonized us, including in Africa and the Caribbean. And we have to learn to love ourselves in our own image, regardless of our sexuality. But as same-gender-loving, fluid, and bi and trans people, we have the SGL movement, or the SGLBT movement, if you will, that is built around being African and Black at its core, and the affirmation and the intentional investigation of Blackness, so we can learn to love ourselves in our own image and turn around this problem that the young brother described earlier in terms of the dysfunction in this community, because it's in our hands to do it. And you people are young enough, everybody on this call is young enough to change the trajectory. But it must be changed by an intentional goal to do so. You can't use whiteness. One of the things that Malcolm said, and I think R.G. Lord said something very similar, you can't use white tools to build a Black house. You got to use Black tools to build a Black house. And we got some wonderful tools. And I think there's some wonderful people who are tools for change on this call. And thank you for engaging me.
Quick question. Do you know where I can find either your research or the researches by Black psychologists or mental health professionals?
You mean Black psychologists generally, or
Yeah, no, well, I mean, either, if not the journals, like research that's been done. I mean, I saw there was, I think there was something like, I think it was like Association of Black Psychologists.
ABC. Yes,
I did.
I'm a member of ABC. That's the Association of Black Psychologists. You can look them up. You can look up the Journal of Black Psychology.
Okay.
You can look up, as Travis mentioned much earlier, CTCA, Critical Thinking and Culture Affirmation, and the work that I've done. It's called CTCA, or Critical Thinking and Culture Affirmation. The successful research was done at Charles Drew University in Los Angeles, and the principal investigator was named Nina Harawa, Harawa. This was done before I got my own doctorate some years ago. You can look at the Black Journal. Let me see, what's it called? The Journal of Black.
I mean, I know I came. Go ahead.
Go on. No, go on.
I said I came across in my last in one of my last presentations I had to do. I came across a book. It's the Handbook of Black Psychology. It was written back in 2009. I did come across that, and I mean, that had a good so I was wondering about that, because within looking in that book and finding, working on treatment plan, also talking about, we call it multiculturalism within the perspective of Blackness when working with a Black client. I saw that they actually had, globally African psychologists and intellectuals in psychology, but they also, what I realized, they also had, what's the word I'm looking for? They also had theoretical orientations, but they also had like techniques, which is something I was just like, I didn't think about, because when you think about that, you think about CBT and everything else like that. But they also had, there were also some scholars from Africa that actually had psychotherapeutic techniques. So that's why I'm more interested in that, because I'm trying to, in my own way, bring that to light when it comes to psychology. Okay, well, if you don't work with Black people, you need to throw Freud and everybody else away because they're not applicable.
Yeah, throws Young and Floyd,
Right, throw all them away
Floyd
because
and all the people together. But wait a minute, you are a fluid Black mental health academic?
yeah.
Get out of here. You're so needed in this world. I am so glad to know that you exist. Thank you for existing. Seriously.
It's
Seriously.
beautiful, but it's rough. But thank you, I appreciate it.
Oh, hey, thank you. I mean, we need more fluid people involved in psychology. So
I mean, I have a friend that's he's within the same field as mine, but he's Pan. So we're trying to get our folks in there.
Okay. Well, we should talk sometime. I mean, seriously, I want to be supportive and helpful, and I want to throw my support because we need y'all.
Right, and I mean, even me. After talking with Travis about this, a lot of things I bounce off with Travis. But like I said, my main thing is to try to figure out, how to use mental health to turn around and empower us. Because I mean, I know we have a lot of stuff, a lot of trauma we have to deal with.
Yes.
But out of all the, how do I say this? Out of all the theoretical orientations that they have come up with on the more Eurocentric side, I would say feminism is the best, because one thing the traditional feminist therapy tells the client is that after you go through all your trauma, you turn around and put yourself back in the community to make sure it doesn't happen again, which is the best component. Because after you've gone through your trauma of we call it your sexual orientation and your race, now you turn around and put yourself back in there to block the next haters from knocking somebody down. So it makes sense.
Well, I was going to recommend that you look into Frantz Fanon. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah, I got two of his books. I got to read them. The Wretched of the Earth,
Great.
and then there's another one, I think White Mass or Blackface White Mass, something like that. I have to read those. But yes, I did come across his work.
Read Dr. Francis Chris Welsing too.
Okay. Yeah, Travis been telling me about that one too. I was like, I don't even know if I got enough time. I'm gonna have to get rid of my Netflix.
But you all, we're gonna go ahead and stop the recording, and you're dismissed. But I'd like to ask Dr. Cleo Manago to stay an extra 5 minutes, because I'm gonna just go ahead and stop the recording. And
I see you all.
Okay, thank you, Travis. Let me know when the next one is. Thank you, Dr. Manago.
You're very